I got all my teeth in, so I'm ready.
Yeah. Today is December 17th, 2019. My name is Joe Todd. This is an interview with Mike Calder in Arkansas City, Kansas. So, where were you born?
I was born in Caney, Kansas.
Caney, Kansas. When's your birthday?
2/2/46, Groundhog's Day.
1946. Who is your father?
Harold Calder.
Harold Calder. And your mother?
Wilma
What was her maiden name?
Hines.
H-N-E-S.
Hines.
Okay. You go through school in Caney?
No. I started out in grade school in Shidler, Oklahoma. Then my dad got transferred and we moved back to Bartlesville. He was with Phillips in the North Burbank unit.
Okay.
And I got transferred, that was between my 7th and 8th grade year. So I started in Bartlesville when I was in 8th grade.
Okay.
But I had aunts and uncles in Bartlesville that, like, I knew a bunch of people already just going over and playing around for years. So it wasn't like I was moving to a strange town.
And you graduated what year?
I graduated in '64.
From college high?
No, I actually graduated from Sedan High School.
Okay.
I transferred, that's a long story. My dad and I didn't get along. And there was reasons for that. And so I separated myself and moved in with my grandparents up in Sedan.
Okay. Who was your favorite teacher?
My favorite teacher, I believe, in high school. You want a high school teacher? I think from Sid Burton.
Sid Burton. And he taught?
He taught social studies like history.
He was also a coach, wasn't he?
He was a baseball coach, and I think he coached basketball too.
You know, he retired and went to Rose State in Midwest and got his PhD in history.
Is that right?
Yeah. I had him too.
Oh,
he was
that?
a neat guy.
I liked him too.
So you say your father worked for Phillips?
Yep.
Okay. What did you do for recreation in high school?
Most of the recreation in high school was spent at the Bartlesville YMCA, wrestling, playing ping pong, swimming, playing pool. Other than that, that was it. That was kind of my center of ill repute.
Yeah. Did you climb the mound?
Yep.
What'd you do on the mound?
I stood up there on the mound and looked out over Bartlesville because my grandfather and grandmother had lived at one time in Bartlesville, and it was just kind of looking down to where they only lived like maybe 2 or 3 blocks from the mound.
Okay. What were their names?
That was George and Fanny Hines.
Okay. Okay. You climbed Circle Mountain?
Never climbed Circle Mountain. Never climbed Circle Mountain. Never had any desire to.
Why?
Why? Because I climbed all of the football stadium and running stairs that I ever wanted to, and that was as high as I ever wanted to get.
Were you on the football team?
Yeah. Actually, I as a sophomore, I made the traveling varsity team at Bartlesville as a nose guard.
Yeah. Have a good team?
We had a fairly good team. We had some really good players on there. I think we went something like 7-3 or something like that year, and really did really well.
Now, where did you live in Bartlesville?
I lived on Garden Drive over by where I lived in a couple of places, but the last place I lived was on Garden Drive, which was over by the junior high football practice field, off of what the hell name is that hill? Everybody used to sled down.
Shawnee Hill?
Yeah, Shawnee Hill, right off Shawnee. It was one block east of Shawnee.
Okay. And so you graduated from Sedan. Okay. What'd you do after high school?
I went to junior college.
Where'd you go?
I started out at Coffeyville and did one semester there. And my roommate left and he went into the Air Force, and we were high school friends. And so rather than having another roommate, my parents had moved. Actually, my dad had left Phillips years before, 2 or 3 years before, and they were living in Ark City. So I came back over here and lived and went to junior college here for 2 years and worked for a while, and then decided I wanted to go in the Army.
When did you join the Army?
I joined the Army in June of '67.
Why the Army over the Navy, Marines, or Air Force?
Well, my dad had been in the Army in World War II, and I had a lot of uncles that had been in the Army. Nobody had ever been in the Marine Corps or my dad was in the Air Corps, but he never was in an airplane. But that was
Okay.
it.
Where'd you go for basic training?
I took basic training at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri.
Fort Leonard Wood. Tell me about basic.
Well, I was out of shape. My feet hurt for about 2 weeks, but once my body became accustomed to basic and running again, I did pretty well in basic.
What type of training did you have in basic?
Oh, we had weapons training, of course. We had hand-to-hand combat. We had bayonets. We learned how to fight with bayonets. We learned how to. A lot was just physical conditioning. Just you run a lot. And really getting your body ready for the next phase, and the fact you learned how to march. Some people had a very hard time learning how to march because they didn't know the left from the right. But like I said, after I learned how to do KP, which I didn't like. I don't think anybody liked KP. But I did find the one job I did like in KP, and that was outside man, because nobody would bother you outside. And the people that I met from all over the country, I mean all over the country, we're all kind of in the same boat too.
Tell me about your drill instructors.
My drill instructors, one I had was. He had been wounded in Vietnam. He had actually been shot right through the mouth, and the round come out the back of his neck. And but he was a hardcore, and he'd tell you a lot of stories about boys, about how you got to get ready, and he would spend a lot of time telling you things that you weren't going to learn anyplace else but from a combat veteran. And they were always demanding, but you learn how to, I'd worked in demanding jobs, and before I'd gone into the Army, when somebody tells you to go do something, you went and did it.
Yeah.
Now,
was basic training geared toward Vietnam?
There was just a lot of conversation around Vietnam. The one thing that we had was in the last month, is we did a lot of ambush training. And then we had one major march that lasted a lot longer than it should have. It ended up being, rather than being something like 15 miles, we got lost. And it ended up being 25 miles, and we didn't get in to start setting up our pup tents till, and when we got to the place we were set up, nobody had any water left. And when they told us didn't have any water left, there was guys that actually just passed out. And so we set up, and finally the water truck came out there got out there with the Lister bags and stuff, and we had water, but we were so tired and worn out. Most of us didn't pitch much of a pup tent that night. It was throw it up and kind of crawl underneath it, and that was all that was going to be done. Because we had gone through 3 or 4 ambushes and etc. And it had been a long, long day.
Yeah. What's your most vivid memory of basic training?
My most vivid memory of basic training was on a Sunday evening in the, I think, orderly room, whatever it was. The Ed Sullivan Show was on. And on the Ed Sullivan Show were the Supremes. And they were singing, here's people who were white, black, brown, etc. And we all of us, thought that was the greatest thing in the world at that time, watching 3 black girls stand up, and we all enjoyed the music. And I thought, what a world this is.
Basic lasted how long?
Basic lasted 8 weeks.
Okay. So from Fort Leonard Wood, where'd you go?
I stayed at Fort Leonard Wood.
Okay.
That's where I went into the Combat Engineering Advanced AIT School.
Okay. Combat engineering. Okay. Tell me about AIT.
Well, AIT was a little bit more hands-on. Anyway, from learning how to use mine detectors, learning how to use certain pieces of equipment, because you could go later on, if you wanted to, you could go into heavy equipment or light equipment usage, or you're just going to be a combat engineer. Mm-hmm. And most of that was just like learning how to do route recons, route surveys, how to build bridges, how to build culverts, how to reinforce and build bunkers, mm-hmm. How to lay mines, and how to lay fence, tanglefoot.
What's tanglefoot?
Tanglefoot is typically you would see big rolls of wire.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, out in front of that is tanglefoot. Tanglefoot is about 3 or 4 inches off the ground, and it's barbed wire. So when it uses a tripwire, you set up tripwires or trip flares in that tanglefoot to let you know that you have movement, mm-hmm. and it's to slow down any aggression that you may have coming towards the wire, especially foot traffic.
Okay. Now, was AIT geared toward Vietnam?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was really built to being how to do mines, how to use heavy weapons. I'd never fired a 50 caliber before, never fired a 60, and so it was used. Those were the heaviest weapons we had anyway. Okay. And I didn't learn how to fire an M79 until I got to Vietnam, and but there was just a lot of. And that's when I actually I wanted to be airborne, mm-hmm. and I went and took the test to be to qualify for airborne school, but I couldn't finish my chin-ups. I'd ran a mile up and down those hills over there in 6 minutes and 15 seconds in combat boots. And I thought that's pretty good. And I did all the sit-ups, but I couldn't do 10 chin-ups. I was gassed. And never again I had the opportunity to take the test again. And but it was kind of amazing when I took my final PCP test. I scored a perfect score on it.
PCP.
That was your physical combat proficiency test.
Okay. Tell me about your instructors in AIT.
Well, they were all, I had, a lot of them were, the older ones were all Korea veterans. There was one who had been to the DR, the Dominican Republic, and they were very. They just told you a lot of stories and worked you hard to get how to when you find mines, how to find mines, because that was a lot of things that we did was doing on route recons, and routes were in the morning. You were out with mine detectors and looking around routes, open routes up for public transportation or even military transport during the day. So we did a lot of that.
And AIT lasted how long?
AIT lasted 8 weeks.
Now, what's your most vivid memory of AIT?
My most vivid memory of AIT was the fact that I had 2 weeks off. I went home after basic for 2 weeks before we started AIT. So I came back, and I was the first guy in the barracks. All right. The second guy in the barracks was a kid from West Virginia, and I mean he was from, by God, West Virginia. And in his previous life, he was a whiskey runner. Okay, and he was as country as you could get. And him and I developed a relationship over that period, and he was really good at certain things, and I was good at certain things, and we fitted up pretty well. But once AIT was over, he went his way, and I went my way, and we never saw each other again. But he was the first guy I ever called country, and he liked it.
You recall his name?
No, I always kidded him about having one leg shorter than the other leg, and is it really true that the cows all eat downhill? So but he was a character. And the song that was really good to him and I used to drink with was that. What was that song about Billy Joel throwing it off of the Chattahoochee Bridge?
Oh yeah.
Throwing the flowers, or whatever it was.
Yes.
Oh yeah, that was the big song during that.
Billy Gentry.
Yeah, it was Gentry that made the song.
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
But that was it. We had
Throwing something off the Tallahatchie Bridge.
Something off the Tallahatchie Bridge.
Yeah. Okay. So, after AIT, where'd you go?
AIT, I went to Texas, Fort Hood, Texas.
Fort Hood. What'd you do there?
I actually went into the 1st Armored and to a S&T company, a supply and transportation company. And in that position, we delivered supplies to all the various combat units. And that was where I first met one of the guys who had been wounded severely in the Ladrang when the first Cav went into the Ladrang. He was pretty. He didn't do much work because he'd been pretty well shot up pretty bad. In fact, he had lost 7 pints of blood on the battlefield. And you remember the story is one of those. The one platoon or whatever got overran or really badly cut in two, and basically they were letting hand grenades roll out of their hands. Well, he was in that group, and he was a Mexican boy from South Texas somewhere, but he didn't do. He had a metal in his arm and metal in his leg because he had really been shot up pretty bad on one side of his body. But what we did, we delivered ammunition or mostly it was food around to the various units so you got to know all the mess hall sergeants pretty well. And The thing about it is, it was a big deal. When I got down there, I flew from Wichita, Kansas. First, it wasn't my first airplane. No, it's like my second airplane flight. From Wichita to Dallas, and then Dallas down to whatever that town is now. Colleen, Texas. Actually, I think it was Waco where I flew in, or another town out there where I had. But the flight from Wichita to Dallas, there was a rock and roll band of some fame on there, and I got down, and we had a terrible turn, and that's when I smashed my head up against. I didn't have my seatbelt on. Smashed my head up against the top of the aircraft. Get into Dallas, and I mean, it's storming. It is dark, and they take off this puddle jumper airplane, and it was like if you ever remember watching Laugh-In, they used to do this Burbank Airlines routine on there. Well, I swear to God, this was the Burbank Airlines, because we're sitting there, and there's only like 3 or 4 people, and I think half of us were military guys being assigned to Fort Hood. So she asked me if I wanted a Coke. She actually brought me a bottle of Coke, and I had a church key around her neck, and opened it up and gave me that. Said, do you want anything to read? And I said, I'm out here looking, because we ain't 300 feet above the ground, because, I mean, it is horrible out there. And I said, yeah, I got a magazine. Well, she brought me a magazine, a Life magazine. It was from 1961. Now this is 1967. It's like going into your doctor's office. Right. So get there. Bags don't show up, so we get picked up by the Army military and escorted to the reception unit. And get to the reception unit, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, and there's one guy sitting behind the deal there, and he don't care whether, go up there and grab you a bunk or whatever, and so none of my gear get in. Well, I came up, the guy comes up there, and we get up and reveille, and they got us in formation, and I got my Class A's on. And they say, you got to do KP. I says, you don't do KP in Class A's. He says, you will do KP in Class A's. I said, okay. So I did that. Anyway, me and one of the mess sergeants got into a disagreement about what I was going to do and what I wasn't going to do, and I ended up being the outside man, and then I pissed him off about being the outside man, and because he asked me where the outside man was, and I said, well, he's inside right now. The outside man's inside. I know he should be outside, but he's inside right now. So I gave him a bunch of double talk, which pissed him off, but it was good for him. Still didn't, my duffel bag still hadn't showed up. Now they're going to process this in the field, because the First Armored and the Second Armored are doing FTX for the next 2 weeks, and they just started field training exercises. And it's raining, it's crappy. So they put us on a deuce and a half, take us out to the field. And we get into the field at First Armored, and out it is just muddy and nasty. And here I got on my nice bright shiny shoes, and by the time I got into the tent, I had mud up to my knees almost. So you're going through personnel, and they're getting all your information, taking your orders and stuff like that. And guy says, well, you're 11 Bravo, but we need guys in supply and transportation right now. And so you're going to go over here to this unit over here, and have you been paid? No, I haven't been paid. They paid me in hard dollars out there, U.S. dollars. He counted out like $96.50, and gave me, and here I was my pockets with my, so I put it in my pockets, and by the time I got to my unit that night, it was pitch dark. And I go out there, and I go in, and there's a tent out there that says headquarters or whatever. So I walk in there, and there's a sergeant sitting in there, and he says, well, He says, "Where's your gear at?" And I said, "I don't have any gear." Okay. But I did have, he says, "Well, you're going to be assigned to this platoon, and they're over there in this tent." Well, I go, and I mean, it's just muddy, and it's raining hard, and I get over there, and everybody has found pallets. They've strung up pallets, and everybody's got their own pallet out there, and I go, "Well, where in the hell is my pallet at?" I finally found one. One of the guys kind of shared it and moved over, and they gave me the sergeant gave me a sleeping bag and stuff like that. He'd gotten it, and so next morning they fixed me up. They'd got me all geared up and everything, and I mean, and so we didn't do nothing out there other than we went down and set up machine gun position. And that's where I stayed for the next 3 days, was down there on that machine gun. And we got relieved every 4 hours or every 6 hours, whatever it was. And then finally we did some actual supply work into, and I just kind of watched and figured out what the hell was going on. Then we get back into barracks on Friday night. No, we were out there, and that was the whole week. It was wet, muddy, nasty, and we were supposed to be moving on people and etc. and people moving on us, but there wasn't nobody moving anywhere, and nothing but tanks were making big deep ditches in the roads and stuff. But that was about the only people that were moving. There wasn't no trucks moving. But anyway, the next week, it was just dry as a bone and hot as hell. And dusty, my God. We came back in on Friday night of that week. And our platoon sergeant, I went in and I didn't even have, just find an empty bunk because they had plenty of empty bunks in the unit. And come to find out, there were guys who there were for veterans from Vietnam and etc. And it was really kind of nice. It was really kind of nice to know that listen to some of their stories about. But Sarge comes in. He goes, "Boys, you got to clean all your shit up tonight. We're going to have an IG inspection in the morning." Oh God, we're gonna stay. That might as well be all night. We got all this mud and dirt and crap to get rid of. Well, about 30 minutes later, he says, "That inspection's been called off. I'll see you Monday morning." By God, you would have thought you never seen barracks empty so damn fast. I bet there wasn't nothing but assholes and elbows that hit that damn door, And that's true. These guys grabbed me and we headed into Temple, Texas. Went to Temple, Texas. Oh my God, that was horrible. We should have never done that. But anyway.
What'd you do?
Oh well, we drank way too much beer. And way too much fun. And next thing we know, we're standing by the MPs, and the MPs and boys says, "Just be cool, boys. We're going to remove you from this location, but you probably got to promise us that you can't come back." So we did. They took us down to the MP station and held us a couple hours, and off we drifted back to. We actually, by that time, had gotten our senses and went back to post, and thought that was much better. So anyway, that was my introduction to. There was down there, and one of the companies that we supported real heavily in getting them ready was the 11th Armored Cav. Mm-hmm. And we spent a lot of time getting them ready to go. They're getting ready to go to Vietnam, and we was getting them all geared up to go. And so from there, the day I decided I was going to go. I just went down and volunteered to go to put my name in for Vietnam. I knew I was going to go there sooner or later. It didn't just matter of time. Might as well get it done and get back as quick as I could. And we had a big formation at lunch. And we had this little first shirt that was a pineapple. He was a Hawaiian guy, and he saluted like this. He'd say, "Attention!" Well, yeah, I thought he was been in the British Army. But anyway, he says, "All right, boys, we got orders for Vietnam." And it was like almost an everyday formation, either at lunch or in the evening, you know. And it says, and my name got called off. I turned to my buddy, and I said, "Damn, that was quick." I only been down there yesterday. So anyway, so that's but during all of this, I've been engaged to my wife prior to going into the service, and I called her up and told her just about the time frame. I said, "Well, I've gotten my orders to go to Vietnam, and I think it's about time you and I got married. I can make you a independently wealthy woman if I don't come back. You can have my $10,000 life insurance policy." So we got married, and next thing I knew, I was headed on my honeymoon. And 2 weeks later, I was on a plane going to Fort Lewis, Washington, and spent my first night. Couldn't get out there quick enough. His flight was late, and I get out there and I couldn't get to the post, so I ended up staying in the Olympia Hotel in Fort Lewis, Washington, and I shared a room with another guy, and it cost us like $10 or something like that. So we stayed there for the night and went out and reported the next day, and the next leg is we were Vietnam bound.
When did you leave for Vietnam?
I left. I think my in-country date is like the 23rd or 24th of March, and I left basically probably same. No, but probably a day earlier, the 21st or something like that. March.
68.
Of 68, yeah.
When you were getting on the airplane going to Vietnam, what were you thinking?
Well, I was thinking about what I had known, what was going on at Tet, and what guys had previously told me about Tet. You know, just keep your head on a swivel and keep your eyes wide open and be afraid of everything. And you know, other than that, I just wanted to get my 365 done and get back home to my wife.
So where'd you land in Vietnam?
Cam Bay.
What'd you do?
Oh God. I never actually ever known that I'd ever get processed in the morning anytime. It's always late in the afternoon or at night. Well, we get into Cameron. It was probably in the afternoon, but so you have the evening formation at the replacement company, right? And oh, by the way, who gets stuck on KP that night? But I had an interesting bunch of guys. I think that every Special Forces guy, every private Special Forces guy come in there, we were all on KP that night together. And me and 3 other ones, all we did all night long was peel potatoes. All night long. I don't know how many potatoes that is, but that was one hell of a lot of potatoes. And I mean, they were just as green as I was, you know. They had no idea where they were going either, you know, other than wherever it was they were going to end up being, you know. Mostly probably went to Nha Trang after that, because that's where they usually got their field assignments out of Nha Trang. But guy told us, "Yeah, when you get out here in the morning, you guys go to bed and catch." I said, "Hell, I hadn't hit my rack over in the building, and this guy comes in and hauls our ass out, and we got to go out and pick up everything. It's not green out on the damn sand." I said, "Well, man, tell me." He says, "I don't care who told you that. You get out there." So I went through and didn't leave that day because they had 3 formations a day: morning, noon, and evening. And I didn't leave till my orders didn't come down to the 70th Combat Engineers till the next evening. And so then we go to the airport. And
How long were you at Cameron Bay?
Oh, maybe 2.5 days, 3 days at the most. And it was hot. I can remember this about Cameron Bay. When the doors of the airplane opened up and walking out of there, how that heat just come, and I mean it just come over you, man. And the next thing you know, you're riding in a bus. It's got bars on the damn, and what the hell they got bars on these damn windows for? Well, you learned out pretty quickly why that's there. But
Why?
well, that's so round doesn't come into the window. But that was my man. That heat just when they opened the door of that airplane, it just took every bit of it took your breath away. So got my orders to go up to the 70th, and where they're going. Well, you're going up to you're going to fly into Pleiku, and you're going to fly up a C-130 up there, and that's all we knew. Well, we get up there and we come in, and twice we get delayed from running because there's bad weather up in the Central Highlands. Finally, we get a break and we load up, and the C-130 is full of ammunition. And they're going, boys, we're going to give you a ride to Pleiku, but right now the airfield is under rocket mortar attack, and when we ain't stopping on the runway, so when I put this gate down,
The
ramp down, you're going to unass. You'll be going slow enough, but and the where you want to go when you hit the runway is you want to go that direction. Well, we come in, we're lined up. He's got us lined up. Gate starts to come down, the ramp starts to come down. I'm the engine slowing down. You don't hear no rounds coming or anything because you can't hear it on that damn C-130 anyway. And it is pitch freaking black out there. And you can just barely see the lights where the runway's at and the ramp's at. And you go out there and he says, you just jump and you hit and you roll like you're an airborne mother. And there we go, out the back end of that airplane. And we lay out there for a while on the runway, and I hear nothing, and you can't see. There is nothing. There is not a light around. Now he said, now you've jumped off the airplane. Now you don't know whether it's that way you're supposed to go or that way was you're supposed to go. Now see, well, okay, the runway's that way. The plane took off back that way because they just took off again. And so it must be that way. We kind of figured that out. Went to the and first when we got finally, I don't know, it stopped raining a lot. There was a little light. I mean, just a pin of a light over. So well, maybe that's where we're supposed to go. So we head over to this light and get in there. And it's a big it's a concrete building. And the light was coming through like a gun port or something, you know. But there was nobody in there. I mean, nothing. It was just concrete. And so I guess, well, this is where we go. And somebody will pick us up or come down here. Well, pretty soon we hear a bunch of noise outside, you know. And here comes in a CBS film crew. They had been out with, come to find out, they had been out on combat patrols with the 4th Infantry Division, and these guys looked like shit. I mean, these are cameramen, you know, and a journalist reporter or something like that. And I mean, tell you, and they looked at us like, who in the hell are you guys? And I don't even know if we even had a conversation with them. We just kind of looked at each other, set off, you know, and looked at each other. Well, the next morning, a deuce and a half shows up, and this guy comes out there, and we get on the deuce and a half, and he's with the guys who've been assigned to the 70th Combat Engineers.
Where'd you sleep that night?
In that bunk, right on the damn wet floor in in that bunker because there wasn't anything in there other than just concrete.
Did you have all your
You had
equipment with you?
you had your duffel bag with
Yeah.
you, and that was it.
Yeah.
Right. You didn't have anything else. You didn't have a helmet. You didn't have a flak jacket. You didn't have. All you had was, what you'd been issued and Fort Lewis, Washington.
Mm-hmm.
And so we head out, and you had to go through Pleiku. You actually had to drive through Pleiku and go north towards Khartoum. And you got out there, and there was a POW camp over one side over here, about one side of the road north of Pleiku. And then you went out, and we made a turn back to the east and went to the first time I ever saw Mountain Yard Village. And there was this lake north of it, a beautiful, big, beautiful lake. And then we went back and we went to a place, it was called Engineering Hill. And so that's when we started processing, and I finally got assigned to headquarters and headquarters company, 70th Combat Engineers, and assigned to the supply and transportation group again. And come to find out, and that was in there, and the first guy I meet there was a guy by the name, and that was late in the evening again. We didn't finally get in. We actually had to go up to the mess hall, and cooks had to bring us out something to eat because we were so late getting back in up there. Some guys were flying out because they'd been signed to combat teams, had to go out to catch the mail helicopter, mail and replacement, and the mail and food helicopter to go out to the fire bases that they were joining their companies at. So God knows when they got there. But you walk up in the sign, the first sign you see, that when I got down to the it was A company or B company, I can't remember what it was, A company headquarters, but outside of the personnel room, there was this, or was the headquarters office, I guess it was. There's this helmet, steel pot on this pot, and it says, "Wear your helmet at all times." Well, I'd been hit with a damn grenade or an RPG. I don't know how it caved in one side and a big hole in the other. And I'm going, if it's going to do that to you, why do you want to have it? What the hell you want to have it on for? So anyway, but I met. That's when I got signed to my team. Had Paul Pelkey. We had there was in my squad. We had 8 guys in my squad.
That was your squad, your team?
Yeah, my squad was my team.
Okay.
And we had a E5 that was in charge of our team, and our team basically dealt with my job. There, I worked with a guy by the name of Paul Pelkey, who was from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Now, that's a big name. Paul Pelkey from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And Paul was in his last 30 days of Vietnam. And Paul was twitchy as he could be. And he says, "I'm going to teach you everything I know in 30 days because you got my job." And our job was we left every morning, and we followed went out with the mine breeding team, and we followed them over to the main highway, and that's where their job ended up.
The mine.
Where they went out and raided for mines.
Okay.
And then we would go over to Camp Holloway, which meant we had to drive back through Pleiku. And it was interesting when you drive back through Pleiku, there's a Catholic church right in the heart of Pleiku that has a VC burnout truck in front of it from TET, right? Because they had completely overrun Pleiku during TET of 68. And we had to go through there, and I was the security guy on the truck, and Pelkey drove because that was his job. So I provided security, then we had another guy provide security with us, and that was Mike Tice. And Mike Tice was from Pennsylvania. He looked like he played football for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But we would go out and we would pick up all kinds of supplies, whatever companies needed, out at Camp Holloway, which is kind of interesting. That's where all the helicopters for the Funny Fourth and everybody were holed up out at Camp Holloway. And my God, you could tell how good the night was been before because there was rockets every night going into Holloway. You know, you'd see a helicopter had gotten hit by a rocket or something. And what we met in coming in there was big Chinooks would offload, and we then would pick it go. And that was actually a pretty good system. They had it pretty much palletized of what went where. Then we had to break it down. You know, they would say 70th Combat Engineers, blah blah blah, and there might be 2 or 3 companies in there, and we take all of the 70 because we delivered there. We took everything to everybody. Mm-hmm. And
how did you deliver the supplies?
We put them on the deuce and a half,
okay,
and carried them back and made to where we could make it to the companies. And if they were any further out than 10 kilometers, then it got put on a helicopter.
okay.
And that was the last thing we did. That's the reason I come to find out everything was late in the evening, because that was the last place we stopped at to fill up helicopters. Mm-hmm. And so that was, and then you got your cycle of pulling guard duty, and either in a gun tower or in a bunker. And it was always kind of scary because we had the first sight just off maybe 500 clicks or less. Mm-hmm. Was the Mountain Yard Village, and there was always activity in the Mountain Yard Village. And then we had this god dang, I don't know if it was a creek or like a trench out in front of our thing. But the weird thing about it is sitting out there. I don't know. It was my second guard duty night. Sitting out there on top of that bunker, and it was raining. God dang, it was raining. And you're sitting on. You got your 60 sitting up here, mm-hmm. and you're sitting on sandbags, and water is just filling this thing up, and I'm going, my God, I'm going to drown. If this doesn't quit raining, I'm going to drown. You know, that's all I can think about. Yeah. But you can't hear anything. When it's raining, you can't hear anything other than the rain.
During the monsoons?
Yeah. And but before you got relieved every morning, it was interesting. Somebody would always turn on Good Morning Vietnam on the radio somewhere. You'd hear it blasting up. And the next thing you would see, it was the casket airplane would come in, and you could see from where we were at. You could see the airfield at Pleiku, and that's the plane that came in and picked bodies up every day. And
what do you think when you saw that?
I just hoped. I made a promise after being there a while that. Or even before that, when I even landed in Vietnam, and I felt that hot air, is I'm going home in the same boots I came here in. And you know, I think you have to get to some point that you just get mentally tough. Mm-hmm. And you know, I don't know what that point is, but you get there some way, because you're going to be, at some point, you're going to be tested. And that was one of the things I remember from basic training that one sergeant we had. He says, you're going to be tested. I don't care what you do, where you're doing it at, you're going to be tested. Because this is not like you got front lines and everybody's, sending messages over the wire to everybody, because that ain't going to happen. And we come underneath rocket attacks probably at least once a week out there at Engineering Hill, and we all knew where they come from, because we operated a quarry. And during the day, when you were through, like what we do sometimes, you'd have to go out and pull security on the quarry till everybody was ready to shut down at the quarry. Or if a vehicle broke down or something, big piece of equipment, you pulled security on that vehicle at night till you got a tank retriever or somebody out there that could move that big piece of equipment. But the rockets always came from the quarry. They either came from the quarry or on the. Actually, it was between the Special Forces headquarters and the mountain yard, and then there was another group on South End. I can't remember what they were, but I know what they were. They were it was MACV. We had a lot of those guys running around up there, and anyway, we'd catch rockets at least once a week. I think we caught a ground attack maybe once. And when we fought out for ground attack, our responsibility was main gate, because that's where we were located on the hill. And our hooch actually got hit by a rocket, and fortunately nobody was in it, but he got hit by a rocket, and because we'd already gone down to the fighting line. But you learn that we did have a ground attack, and the next day you learn how to pick up bodies and throw them in the back of a 5-ton dump. And that's something you'll never forget. Mm-hmm. That, and I finally learned I liked the gun tower better than I liked being in a bunker. Because being in a bunker, you fought with the rats all night, and the rats got big. You didn't have them in the gun tower, but you were a good target in the gun tower for a B-40 rocket or something like that. But other than that, bunkers were good targets for B-40 rockets also. But
how long you play coup?
I was at Pleiku for 5 months, maybe 4 months, because the 101st had taken over Jalais Combat Base up by Fubai, which was just south and west of Wei, and they had been involved in the operations of Tet, and had moved up there during Tet, and they were getting ready for a big operation into the Ashaw, and the 27th engineers had moved up from, they had been down at Vong Tau supporting the 11th Armored Brigade. And they moved up there and didn't have enough people to support. So that's when they got, I don't know, there was about 100 of us or 125 of us that got selected to move up to there. And that was a big circle jerk, Nobody knew you gathered up. You didn't have orders other than the plaque that you were going to report and be on this truck and go down to the airfield and dump down there. So there was 100 guys plus that show up down to the Pleiku airfield in the morning. Rained. Finally, the Air Force guys had it pretty well down there, I think, because they had a coffee truck come down there and had donuts on it, and that's all. Guy comes out and asks us if we had any food. But no. And later that day, we come back out, and this guy, this officer, come over, and he said, and we're all sitting around here laying around on our duffel bag and gear, right? You guys had any foods? No, we had donuts this morning. And it was the base commander. Says, you guys know where you're going? We have no idea where we're going. Well, they got there later that evening. Actually, the base commander.
Were you at Vung Tau?
No, we were at Pleiku.
Oh, you were at Pleiku.
Yeah.
Okay.
The 27th had moved up from Vung Tau
Okay.
to what we now call Camp Eagle.
Okay.
It was originally called Jalais Combat Base.
Now, you at the air base there?
Yeah, we're at the air base now, and getting ready to be transferred up to Camp Eagle. And we finally actually slept on the ground that night. It was till the next morning before the aircraft showed up, the C-130. And it's the first time I sat on a C-130 in the damn rucksack, and the damn straps that come down, And on top of that, there was Vietnamese CIDGs on this airplane. And I sat there on an airplane with a Vietnamese officer on one side of me. No, I think it was an Arvin Ranger or somebody. And a damn goat looking me in the face. And that's how I flew from Pleiku to Phu-Bai.
Why was there a goat?
Well, they had the CIDGs. When CIDGs traveled, they take everything with them.
Now, CID?
That's Civilian Irregular Defense Guard.
Okay.
They primarily worked for the, or supported the Special Forces.
Okay.
And they were probably moving to some Special Forces camp somewhere. And they travel everything, mom, dad, the whole thing. They, all the pots and pans and everything. So here you got 140 some people on this aircraft and animals going up to Phu-Bai. We get Phu-Bai, then we get out to the 27th Combat Engineers, and I got assigned to headquarters company out there in Supply.
Is that at Camp Eagle?
That was at Camp Eagle, yeah. And I actually ended up getting I got to be the company clerk. The supply sergeant was in it was only second or third tour, I can't remember, but he was suffering from PTSD pretty badly. He'd pulled a lot of combat patrols with the 11th Armored Cav, and he didn't do much. And so they were wanting somebody to do his job, and they put another guy in to do his job, and I actually got to be the company clerk, because the company clerk that was there was getting ready to rotate. Now, he was getting ready to rotate and leave Vietnam and go back to California. He was a surfer guy. And so I got to be company clerk, and it only takes 2 hours in the morning to fill out your reports and stuff from the day, and so I started doing we did a lot of route recons and security patrols, and so I volunteered to do those, and rather than sit around my office, I came over to Vietnam to do something. It wasn't to sit around and file reports. And that eventually rotated into, when we got a new CO, he had been in charge of intelligence on the battalion level, and he wanted a driver that would go out to the fire bases with him, and so I said, "I'm your guy." And he'd known me from, because he had patrolled with me on security patrols and stuff like that, and on base security issues. And so I got into, and he liked to be up and gone early, because the road out into the Osho is Route 547. Our job was to open up Route 547. So I got to recon that with another guy with the 101st before they started the project, all the way from Firebase Birmingham to Firebase Bastogne, then on to Firebase Vagel. and because we were building 547 was a road that went out and was going to the Oshaw because there was an airstrip, an old French airfield out in the Oshaw that the 101st wanted to use as a resupply base, or open up as a resupply base. And first time I ever met Kit Carson, the Choiloy Kit Carson scout, was that time we went out there, and he just, me and this other guy, he says, Buku VC, Buku VC. This is no shit. So that was my introduction to Route 547. But every day, I probably had 3 or 4 months to go, and every day, me and the old man would get up and haul ass to the. He'd get out to Birmingham. There was Boyd, Birmingham, Bastogne, Vegal, Airborne, Birch's Gardens, a bunch of them out there, but you couldn't. You had to fly.
These were all fire bases?
They're all fire bases, the 101st.
Mm-hmm.
And Ripcord. The Bastogne was, the 101st would hold it during the dry season, and monsoon season, the VC would own it.
Now, how'd you get out to these fire bases?
Jeep.
Jeep.
We had, there was a route going north out of Camp Eagle that you took, and it intersected Route 547 on the other side of the Perfume River. And then 547 went into Way. Mm-hmm. And so we'd connect up there. And at the Perfume River there, that bridge, we had built a bridge over there several times, and it would get blown up. But that was only because of some rules of engagement were changed. And Boyd was over on the other side, but right across from Boyd was the Imperial summer home of the Emperor, and had this stone wall all the way up around it and everything, and you weren't allowed to do anything. You couldn't fire into it, but it was what we call a VC R&R center.
Yeah.
And then you had the valley come up to the Perfume River, and I had a picture somewhere that I got at Boyd that shows the helicopters flying up behind with the mountains up behind them, really kind of cool. But then you go down the road, and the road goes on to Birmingham. Birmingham was a major jump-off point for all airborne operations. Any operations, that's where the helicopters came in, would pick up their teams and fly off. All the LRP operations were out of Birmingham. And so Birmingham was a very, very busy place. And then you had Bastogne, and then Vegal. And I got as far as Vegal before I rotated out, and we had built the road pretty up, and we'd go all the way down to the front end of that road. The old man wanted to go down there, and he'd talk to people about what the hell was going on. And so I'd actually have to give him and say, sir, we got a 45-minute drive as fast as this Jeep can go, at least to get us back to Perfume River, or at least back to Boyd or Birmingham. If we don't leave now, you're sleeping out here by yourself tonight. So, because he liked to be out there amongst the troops, and that's the way I spent my last 4 months out there. And then when I got to come D-Roast time, D-Roast date was coming up, and he let me leave the company about 3 days early to head to Cameron Bay, and got down to, flew by down to Da Nang, to the replacement center down there. Got drunk with some Marines that were getting ready to D-Roast, and went on down to Cameron Bay. Then I get to Cameron, and I started running this with some of the guys that had been in my company when we were stateside with 1st Armored. And my platoon sergeant at the time. We started running into each other. No, that was in Da Nang. That was in Da Nang we started running into each other. All of us had the same D-Roast date. So.
When was your D-Roast date?
It was March March 23rd, 24th, something like that, 22nd
Of 60,
of 69.
69.
And I got down to Cameron Bay, and I had not bought anything. You know, guys had bought cameras and recorders, you know, and stuff like that to have, you know.
I left Vietnam March 23rd, 1969.
Is that right?
From Cameron Bay.
We may have been on the same damn plane.
Flew into SeaTac,
SeaTac, yeah.
Fort Lewis.
In fact, we got into SeaTac and there was, we were late getting process out of SeaTac. By the time they got all your shit together and whatever ribbons they were going to give you or stuff like that, we were late, and I was flying into Wichita. There was like three of us. Well, there was two guys. They were flying on to Louisiana or someplace, but we didn't get on our plane. So I had to call my wife and tell her I missed the plane. And you don't want to tell your wife you want to miss the plane, but we did. And we had a plane. We'd be in first thing in the morning. But the interesting thing, so all of us 3 or 4 of us guys decided we want to go get a drink. And we're all old enough. We're all 21. And so we go up to this cocktail lounge, and it's pretty empty. And there's only maybe a couple of people, and there's this naval officer sitting in there. And the lady says, "We don't serve military guys in here." And we did, you know, okay. And then this Navy guy says, "Those are guests of mine." And she kind of looked at him. He says, "I said those are guests of mine." So we come in there, and he sat down with, introduced him. Come to find out, he was a cousin of, I can't remember his last name, but the kid he played baseball with in Bartlesville. He was from Tulsa, and his cousin's name was Bobby something. I cannot remember his last name. But he was a part Cherokee guy. And anyway, we had a long conversation. First time I ever drank a Singapore sling. He bought everybody Singapore slings. My God, we shouldn't have had more than 2, but we did. Anyway, so we go down and sleep.
Why wouldn't she serve military?
She didn't say. She says we don't serve military.
This is in Seattle?
This is in SeaTac Airport in Seattle. You know, it's probably 8 o'clock by the time we got there, because it was, like I said, it was late, but they were open. They were open at least for the next 2 hours anyway. So we went down and, you know, caught a nice sleep. Get on our airplane. There was like maybe 4 guys on this airplane flying to Wichita, Kansas, and one of them's flying on away to somewhere in Louisiana. He's catching a flight, or the flight's going on down there. Mm-hmm. Well, the captain welcomed us aboard, and he said, "Boys, all the drinks are on me." Now, this is great. So they had to peel us off the airplane when we get to Wichita. But we get to Wichita, met my wife, and it was the greatest day of my life.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And when were you discharged?
July 18th, 1970.
Now, what'd you do until you discharged?
I got stationed at Fort Knox, Kentucky, in a holding company, which means that they didn't know what to do with you when you got there. And the more fun about it, my wife came with me, and we found a place to live in the back of a tattoo shop in Radcliffe, Kentucky. Oh my God. Because I was an E5 by that time, and you had to wait to get base housing. Mm-hmm. But I got assigned to this unit, and I mean, there was guys in there. What it was a company. If you had more than 6 months to do when you got back, and you had less than 9 months to do when you got back. Something like that. And anyway, they put me in that. Nobody had any jobs. I mean, morning formations were a joke. Evening formations were even more of a joke. Both of the officers had no combat, had not been to Vietnam yet at all, so there was no respect for anything at all. Finally, they got a first shirt in there. It had been with the 5th Mech up in Quang Tri, and I knew, and him and I at least had chewed some ground together, being in Quang Tri province. But got a roommate when I was on there, and he had been a machine gun operator on an APC for the 4th Infantry Division. So him and I had some ground to talk about. But he was about this big, and he was wild. He'd come in the evening and take his boots off, throw his socks up on the wall and go, God dang, I can wear them one more day. They didn't stick. But anyway, for a month, we just reported and sat out in the day room, play pool. Of course, there's a lot of medical holding guys there, medical holes, and then I think there were some mental holes. But anyway, we had 2 or 3 guys that got stabbed in their sleep at night. Anyway, I finally got a job working for in manpower and budgeting. And it was an office that had I was the lowest ranking individual in that office. And there was like 1 or 2 civilians, and the rest of them were all E7s or E8s, and officers were all majors and above. What my job was, and I had this big desk, so you can imagine, and on that desk was an organizational chart for the 1st Army, all the way down to whomever, right? And so my job was to go around to all the training companies and pick up their requisitions. Then I'd bring them to this civilian, and then the civilian would give me a report that this is the dollar value. I kept track of the budget for the training brigade, and which was a pretty good job. My first accounting job, and I get this phone call one day. It comes to my desk, and I pick up the phone, and I said, "This is Sergeant Calder." The guy goes, "Where is my goddamn toilet paper?" What? And I said, "Who is this?" He says, "This is Colonel Goiter, 1st Training Brigade," or something like that. I go, "I don't handle toilet paper." And he said, well, I forget what anyway, gets the question, and he says, "You need to go find." I says, "Sir, I don't take orders from you." And he says, I said, "My colonel sits downstairs. You can call my colonel and you can do it fine." He says, "But I don't need to call your colonel. You can find out where my goddamn toilet." So I can find out where your goddamn toilet paper's at. And so I'm looking here, and I got this big organizational chart, and I followed it down from the president down to here, down to there, down to here. And I said, "Well, first of all, you are not in my organizational chart, because anywhere up the line to the president, I don't report to you at all, Colonel Goiter." Hung up the phone. So my sergeant major sitting over there, and he goes, "What the fuck was that all about?" And I told him. He says, "You're gonna get a visit." Well, that afternoon I'm sitting there, and I hear spurs coming up the stairs. Next thing I see is a cavalry hat coming up. And he goes, and Sergeant Major sitting down there, and he goes, looks at Sergeant Major and says, "Where's Sergeant Calder's office at?" "Well, he's down there at that desk at the on the left-hand side. So I come down there. I'm sitting there and I'm crawling down. And anyway, he came in and he apologized. And, you know, and we had a little conversation, and he went on and I think he had somebody else's ass to chew about his toilet paper. But anyway, you know. So when I was over about a week later, I was over at his headquarters and went in to see his supply sergeant to get something or take something over, I can't remember. When he walks by and he comes back up the hall and says, "Sergeant Calder, what are you doing over here?" And I told him, he says, "Come down to my office." So I go down to his office and what the hell. So him and I sat there and we got to really be kind of good friends. We sat there and chatted and found out what I did in the Army and what he did, you know. He'd been with the 1st Cav but he was all cavalry, let me tell you. He had spurs. Every time I saw him, he had spurs on.
As my unit, 1st Cav.
He wasn't anybody to be messing with. But anyway, we ended up having just a nice conversation. But I'll never forget the day. It was kind of funny when you're leaving the Army and you got out process, and you're down to your skivvies, and we're standing in line there, and the guy says, "You want to file any claims?" Ask the people, "You want to file any claims against the United States government?" And this guy's standing in front of me, and I mean, tell you what, he is just covered. And I asked him where to get all those wounds from. He says, "Grenade." And the guy asked him, and he says, "Yep, I have 854 entry and exit wounds. That's my claim against the United States government." I mean, it was just all through his arms and his legs and his torso. And I mean, where you see one come in here and went out on the other side, shrapnel did. I got I'll never forget, 858 entry and exit wounds. That's my claim. And the guy says, "You know you're going to have to go into stay in the Army. You're not going to get out today or tomorrow, whatever it was." The guy says, "Fine with me." And then he asked me if I got any. I know I ain't got no claims. But I always amazed that this guy had the balls to stand there and spread his arms out his legs. I got 858 entry and exit wounds.
Did you work with the mountain yards in Vietnam?
No. We only had. It was strange having the mountain yard village there. We would go down and do like civilian things, like take supplies down to them and stuff like that, and then they wanted us to head around and drink rice wine and all the hoopla but the one thing the mountain yards had, they had a herd of horses. They had like those Mongolian type horses, but you know what? They didn't use them for anything. Didn't use them for pack animals, because the pack animal was their wife. The horses were, I never really thought if that was your position in the tribe or it was the tribe's position, because you always met the tribal chief, but you never got into that conversation about that anyway. And it's actually when I got my my mountain yard bracelets was going down, and when they'd like to get you on the nose, slap you on the nose, and pinch your cheek, and and if you played cards with them, oh my God, that was. I never understood the card game, because everybody squatted around and threw a card in there. And next thing you know, people are hitting each other. When did we play for money, guys? Or they'd pinch you on the arm or grab you by the ear and twist and just laugh, So the first time I ever did, a guy pinched me on the ear like that, and I threw a card in, and I go back over and grabbed him on the ear. He just laughed at me. I was like, "Well, I guess this is what we're supposed to do." And so,
what was the attitude of the Vietnamese civilians?
the civilians, Because I was never near real city or anything like that. Some of it was pleasant. I mean, they were always pleasant, but some of them I wouldn't trust as far as I could throw them. I was particularly always leery of people Vietnamese that were working in your camp, even though people say they were vetted. I never wanted to. I never wanted to be close around them or anything like that. But there were some good ones. I know I met some good soldiers, RVN soldiers that I trusted a lot. But the Mountain Yard people were I knew they were tough. You know, they respected you and you respected them because anybody who can fight with a blowgun and a bow and arrow,
Yes.
you know, and be 90% naked year round is pretty damn tough.
What did you do after you got your discharge?
Actually, I got my discharge. I went to work for Firestone Tire and Rubber Company because there was, in the last days of service, they had this project, something or other, transition or something like that. And Firestone was involved in it and making people learn how to do the credit management business. So I did that and was a trainee and went to work for Firestone Tire and Rubber Company for about a year.
Where's this?
I worked in Ponca City, Duncan, and Bartlesville. All right. My last place was Bartlesville because that's when I decided I want to go back. I had to go repo somebody's refrigerator, and I just could not do that. And I said, and a buddy of mine, a real good lifelong friend of mine, told me, Mike, you need to go back to school. And so me and my wife had a conversation. And went back to school at Oklahoma State with 2 kids. And
What'd you study?
Accounting. I got my BS in accounting at Oklahoma State, and I minored in economics.
So when did you come to Ark City?
Well, I went to junior college here, and that's where I met my wife. We got back here. Let's see. At a job, I was working for Air Products and Chemicals, and not Air Products then. I was working for Abbott Laboratories. I worked for Abbott Laboratories in Wichita, Kansas, and at that time the Wichita school district wasn't the greatest school district in the world, and my folks were still living here, and my wife's family was here, and so I asked the kids where they wanted to live. And they said they wanted to live close to Grandma and Grandpa, so and I was in 82 or 83, something like that. Because we lived after I graduated from Oklahoma State, we lived in Tulsa, Broken Arrow, Fort Wayne, Indiana, Frederick, Oklahoma, Muskogee.
Yeah.
We'd moved around, had several moves. Then was with I was plant controller for Abbott Laboratories at a chemical plant up in Wichita, and then that plant was bought by Air Products and Chemicals, and I made the change then and went out of the accounting and onto the supply side of the business, and became the materials manager for that plant. And the rest of my career with Air Products, and I went to work for Johnson & Johnson later on, was in sourcing operations.
Would you join the Army again?
Yeah.
I'd like to do a word association.
All right.
I'll give you some words and you give me your reaction.
Okay.
First one is basic training.
Sucks.
AIT.
Better.
Fort Hood.
Fort Hood. It's pretty.
70th Combat Engineers. 27th Combat Engineers.
Exciting.
Play cool.
Culturally shocking.
Camp Eagle.
Big.
Vietnam.
Wet.
Why were we in Vietnam?
I've asked myself that many times. You know, what has been discovered over the last few years, we probably never should have been in Vietnam. But I went there, and I volunteered in the armies, and you know, my family had been in World War I, World War II, Korean War, and I thought it was just I was a young American kid doing what I thought was required of me to do.
Ho Chi Minh.
Probably a very good leader.
Lyndon Johnson.
If I didn't have to think about the war, he was probably the great social educator.
Richard Nixon.
Didn't like him.
How do you want to be remembered?
That I was a good husband, a good father, and a good soldier.
Anything else you want to talk about?
No.
Well, sir, this is an excellent interview.
Thanks.
I want to thank
I
you
think
for
I got a little windy.
I want to thank you for your service and thank you for the interview.
Joe, thank you.
And again, this is December 17th, 2019. My name is Joe Todd. This has been an interview with Mike Calder in Arkansas City, Kansas. Thank you.
Thank you.